The Veltaran fleet hung in the void like a constellation of death, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with bioluminescent warnings. Admiral Kethmoran's primary eye clusters focused on the sensor readings that had sent ripples of terror through the Galactic Council for the past 72 standard cycles. The human derelict ship Wraith had been found. Impossible, hissed Fleet Commander Yexandra, her serpentine form coiled around the command throne. The humans were exterminated 3 centuries ago. Every last world glassed, every ship atomized. We made certain. Kethmoran's mandibles clicked nervously. The Veltarans had led the Great Purge alongside 17 other species, united in their fear of humanity's rapid expansion and terrifying adaptability. In merely 200 years, humans had gone from primitive surface dwellers to a species that conquered systems with ruthless efficiency. Their ships were nightmares of angular death. Their soldiers fought with a savagery that made even the war-bred Korthak pause. "Sir," reported Navigation Officer Plexith, "the derelict is confirmed human design. Prometheus-class heavy destroyer. Hull designation reads as UES Wraith." The name sent electric fear through every bridge officer. The Wraith had been humanity's most feared vessel during the war, a ship that had single-handedly destroyed 3 Korthak battle groups and turned the moon of Kepler 442c into a crater. Its captain, Ronan Vex, had been declared an enemy of all sentient life by the Galactic Council. "How long since it went dark?" Kethmoran demanded. 307 standard years, sir. Right after the Battle of Proxima. The Battle of Proxima. The final human stand where their remaining fleet had been cornered and obliterated. Or so they thought. "Sir," Plexith's voice wavered, "there's something else. The ship, it's moving." Kethmoran's breathing slits flared. "Moving how?" "Slow corrections. Minor course adjustments. And sir, it's been doing this for the past 18 cycles. Following trade routes." Yexandra's scales rippled with dread. "It's hunting." The tactical display showed the Wraith's recent movements, a methodical pattern following the major shipping lanes between Veltaran colonies. 3 freighters had gone missing in this sector over the past month. All Veltaran. All carrying civilian refugees. "How many aboard?" Kethmoran asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Unknown, sir. Scans are blocked. The hull's composition includes materials we don't recognize. But sir, if humans survived aboard that ship for 3 centuries." Plexith's translator struggled to convey the concept. Kethmoran understood. 300 years of isolation, of knowing their species had been genocide. 300 years of rage fermentation in the dark between stars. What had those humans become? "Admiral," the communications officer buzzed urgently, "incoming transmission from Veltaran High Command." The holographic image of Supreme Chancellor Votheris materialized, all 6 of his armed tentacles writhing with agitation. "Kethmoran, you will destroy that abomination immediately." "Chancellor, if there are survivors." "There can be no survivors." Votheris's bioluminescent patches flared angry crimson. The humans were eliminated for the safety of all galactic civilization. Whatever remains on that ship after 3 centuries of isolation will be worse than what we originally faced. Kethmoran's tactical display showed his force: 12 Veltaran destroyers for heavy cruisers, and the flagship Eternal Vigilance. More than enough firepower to level a small planet. "Sir," reported the sensor technician, "the human ship has changed course. It's heading directly for us." The bridge fell silent except for the rhythmic pulsing of the ship's biological systems. On the main display, the Wraith was indeed turning toward them, its angular hull reflecting starlight like a predator's tooth. "Speed," Kethmoran whispered. "Accelerating past maximum human specifications from our records." "Sir, that ship shouldn't be able to move that fast." Yexandra's serpentine form began shedding stress scales. 3 centuries to modify their technology. 3 centuries to improve it. To perfect it for revenge. The Wraith continued its approach, and for the first time in 300 years, a Veltaran admiral felt the primal fear their ancestors had known when humanity first reached for the stars. "Distance to target, 12,000 kilometers and closing," announced sensor technician Falmec, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking with nervous energy. "Their approach vector is unusual, sir." Admiral Kethmoran studied the tactical display. The Wraith wasn't approaching in any formation pattern from the archives. Instead, it moved with predatory grace, weaving between asteroid debris like a hunting creature stalking prey. "Hail them," he ordered. The communications array sent standard Galactic Council diplomatic protocols in 17 languages. The response came immediately: Not words, but something that made every organic being on the bridge recoil in visceral terror. On the main display, the converted Veltaran vessels now moved in perfect coordination with the Wraith, their once beautiful bioluminescent hulls replaced by harsh human angles and predatory geometries. The sight was obscene, like watching corpses dance at their own funeral. Captain Vex's augmented face appeared on every screen throughout the bridge. Are you beginning to understand, Admiral? This is what you created when you chose genocide over coexistence. Kethmoran's mandibles clicked frantically. Fleet Medical, report on the biocontamination. Chief Medical Officer Tathine's voice crackled through failing communication systems. Admiral, it's not a virus. It's worse. The humans have weaponized evolution itself. They're rewriting our biomechanical DNA in real time, forcing our ships to adapt into their preferred configurations. Countermeasures. Sir, to develop countermeasures, we'd need decades of research. This technology is centuries beyond our current understanding. The tactical display showed the nightmare spreading. The converted ships weren't just changing appearance. They were becoming more efficient, more deadly. Human engineering brutality merged with Veltaran biological adaptation was creating something neither species had achieved alone. Sir, Navigation Officer Plexith announced, incoming transmission from Veltaran High Command. Supreme Chancellor Votheris materialized, his bioluminescent patches strobing panic signals. Kethmoran, what is your status? Chancellor, we're facing complete fleet conversion. The humans have developed technology that turns our own ships against us. Impossible. Our records show human technology was centuries behind. Vex's laughter interrupted the transmission. Chancellor Votheris, we remember you as well. You personally signed the order for the orbital bombardment of New Terra. 17 billion human civilians. The Chancellor's tentacles writhed with fear. You monitored our communications for 3 centuries? Among other things, Vex replied. We've had considerable time to study your species, Chancellor. Your mating patterns, your psychological triggers, your genetic weaknesses. Would you like a demonstration? Without warning, the Chancellor began convulsing. His bioluminescent patches flared in patterns that Kethmoran recognized as genetic distress signals. Stop this, Kethmoran demanded. Oh, this isn't us, Admiral, Vex said pleasantly. This is simply the Chancellor experiencing the early stages of Veltaran hemorrhagic fever. A disease that was eradicated from your species, until 37 minutes ago when we released it into your homeworld's atmosphere. The transmission from High Command cut to static. When it resumed, chaos filled the background. Alarms, shouting, the distinctive sound of a civilization under siege. You've committed genocide, Kethmoran whispered. No, Admiral. We've committed justice. The difference is that we're being considerably more efficient about it. On the tactical display, 3 more Veltaran ships succumbed to conversion. The Wraith's hybrid fleet now outnumbered the remaining loyal vessels 2-1. Sir, reported Weapons Officer Krental, the converted ships are moving to surround us. Their weapon signatures show they're charging for simultaneous firing. Kethmoran realized the horrible truth. The Wraith wasn't trying to destroy his fleet, it was farming them. Each converted ship became a tool for converting more, an exponential expansion of human revenge. Emergency jump to hyperspace, he ordered. All remaining ships, scatter jump to different coordinates. Sir, hyperspace navigation is compromised. The bioneural contamination has affected our jump calculations. We could end up anywhere, or nowhere. Do it anyway. As the Eternal Vigilance prepared for emergency jump, Vex's voice echoed through the ship's communication systems. Running, Admiral? How disappointingly predictable. But it doesn't matter. We've already marked every ship in your fleet. Our conversion virus is now part of your biomechanical matrix. Wherever you go, you'll carry our gift with you. The jump to hyperspace felt wrong. Instead of the usual smooth transition, the ship lurched and twisted as conflicting navigational systems fought for control. When they finally emerged into normal space, Kethmoran's worst fears were confirmed. Position report, he demanded. Sir, we're in the Veltaran sanctuary system. 23 billion civilians, sir. The largest refugee population in Council space. Yxandra's scales rippled with horror. Sir, if the conversion virus spreads to the planetary defense grid. Kethmoran understood. The sanctuary world's biomechanical infrastructure would become the Wraith's greatest weapon. Orbital defense platforms would convert into human siege engines. Planetary shields would become prisons. An entire star system of refugees would become hostages. Sir, the communications officer reported. We're receiving thousands of distress signals. Ships throughout the system are beginning to show signs of bioneural cascade failure. On the long-range sensors, Kethmoran could see it beginning, the systematic conversion of an entire civilization's infrastructure. Within hours, the Veltaran sanctuary system would become a human stronghold, and they had brought the virus directly to them. Captain Vex, Kethmoran transmitted. What do you want? The response came immediately. What we've always wanted, Admiral. What you denied us 3 centuries ago. We want to live. Unfortunately, that now requires your species to die. The Veltaran sanctuary system descended into nightmare as the conversion virus spread through every biomechanical system with terrifying efficiency. Admiral Kethmoran watched helplessly as orbital defense platforms twisted into predatory configurations, their organic components screaming as they were rewritten into hybrid monstrosities. It was laughter. Human laughter, distorted by centuries but unmistakably filled with malicious joy. Then a voice, speaking perfect Veltaran. I remember you, Admiral Kethmoran. Your biosignature is in our archives. You were at Kepler 442. You watched our children burn. Kethmoran's gill slits clamped shut. How could they know his identity? How could they speak their language so fluently? I am Captain Ronan Vex of the UES Wraith, the voice continued, and the name sent ice through every alien heart present. We've had 3 centuries to perfect our understanding of your species. Your weaknesses. Your fears. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Wraith. What appeared made Commander Yexandra's serpentine form coil in horror. The human who called himself Ronan Vex bore little resemblance to the species in their archives. His pale skin was marked with biomechanical augmentations that pulsed with unnatural light. His eyes had been replaced with multispectrum sensors that tracked each bridge officer individually. But most disturbing were the modifications to his neural structure, visible through transparent skull plating that revealed a brain interfaced directly with the ship's systems. You've changed, Kethmoran managed. Adaptation, Vex replied. 300 years is sufficient time for evolution, especially when motivated by the complete extinction of one species. Behind Vex, other figures moved in the shadows, humans modified beyond easy recognition, their bodies integrated with technology that seemed to breathe and pulse with organic life. We surrender, Kethmoran said quickly. We can discuss terms. Terms? Vex augmented features contorted into something that might have once been a smile. Did you offer terms to the children of New Geneva? To the colonists of Harmony Station? That was war. This is also war, Admiral. But this time you're the endangered species. The Wraith suddenly accelerated beyond anything in Veltaran records, closing the distance to weapons range in seconds. Kethmoran barely had time to order evasive maneuvers before the human ship opened fire. But these weren't the plasma cannons or kinetic weapons from the archives. The Wraith fired something that looked like liquid shadow, tendrils of dark energy that moved with purpose and intelligence. When they struck the destroyer Vengeance's claw, the ship didn't explode. Instead, it began to change. Report. Kethmoran shouted as his bridge crew frantically worked their stations. Sir, the Vengeance's claw is... Sir, it's being consumed. Their hull is being converted into something else. On the display, the Veltaran destroyer writhed as its biomechanical armor was systematically replaced by angular human design. Within minutes, what had been an allied vessel now bore the harsh lines and predatory aesthetics of human engineering. 3 centuries to study your technology, Vex's voice echoed across all channels. To understand how your bioships grow and adapt. To learn how to make them ours. The converted destroyer turned its weapons on the Veltaran fleet. But when it fired, the weapons were no longer bioplasma cannons. They were something new, hybrid weapons that combined human brutality with Veltaran biological efficiency. All ships, scatter formation. Kethmoran ordered. Target the Wraith directly. 16 Veltaran vessels opened fire simultaneously, their bioplasma weapons painting space in toxic green. The concentrated firepower was enough to vaporize a small moon. The Wraith made no attempt to dodge. Instead, the human ship absorbed the energy. Impossible, whispered Yexandra. Not impossible, Vex replied, somehow monitoring their communications. Merely inevitable. We've had centuries to study captured Veltaran weapons. To understand how your bioplasma functions. To develop immunity. The Wraith began to glow with absorbed energy, then suddenly released it all in a directed pulse that swept through the Veltaran formation. Ships that had fought together for decades suddenly found their biomechanical systems turning against them. Keth watched in horror as 3 more of his destroyers began the conversion process. Within his own flagship, warning alerts screamed as their biological components showed signs of contamination. "Sir," reported the medical officer, "our bioneural networks are being infiltrated. It's like a virus but specifically designed for our physiology." The Wraith continued its predatory circle around the increasingly chaotic Velturan fleet. One by one, ships were either converted or disabled as their own biological systems betrayed them. "How?" Keth demanded, staring at the nightmare Captain Vex had become. "Simple, Admiral," Vex replied. "We learned from the best teachers. You." The Velturan flagship Eternal Vigilance shuddered as another bioneural cascade failure swept through its organic systems. Admiral Keth watched his fleet dissolve into chaos as ship after ship fell to the Wraith's insidious conversion weapons. "Sir, the cruiser Infinite Resolve has gone dark," reported Commander Yexandra, her serpentine form twisted with stress. "That's 7 ships lost to conversion, 3 more disabled by bioneural failure." "Sir, Planetary Governor Yalthmir is requesting immediate evacuation," reported Communications Officer Drenval. "The surface bioinfrastructure is failing. Life support systems are converting to human specifications." Keth gill slits flared with desperate calculation. 23 billion civilians had nowhere to run. The system's jump gates were already compromised, their bioneural networks corrupted by the virus. Any ship attempting to leave would carry the contamination to other worlds. "Sir," Commander Yexandra hissed, "incoming vessels at jump point 7. The tactical display lit up with new contacts. The Wraith and its growing fleet of converted vessels emerging from hyperspace. But they weren't alone. Massive geometric constructs followed them, clearly human in design but built with technologies that defied known physics. "What are those?" Keth demanded. Captain Vex's face appeared on the main screen, his biomechanical augmentations pulsing with satisfaction. "Foundry ships, Admiral. 3 centuries of preparation includes building the tools necessary for rapid expansion. Each one can convert raw matter into whatever we require. Ships, weapons, habitats for the new human colonies we'll be establishing." "You mean Velturan colonies?" Keth said coldly. "Not anymore." The Foundry ships moved toward the system's asteroid belt and gas giant. Within minutes, mining beams began harvesting raw materials while construction matrices assembled them into more hybrid vessels. The Wraith's fleet wasn't just converting existing ships, it was building an entirely new armada. "Sir," Tactical Officer Krental announced, "the converted defense platforms are targeting civilian evacuation ships. The human vessels they're hurting the refugees." Keth watched in horror as converted orbital stations used precision weapons to disable civilian transport's engines without destroying them. Thousands of ships filled with families, children, and elderly found themselves trapped in decaying orbits. "They're not killing them," Yexandra observed. "They're collecting them." Vex's laughter filled the bridge. "Very perceptive, Commander. We learned during our own genocide that death is wasteful. Far better to repurpose existing resources." "Repurpose." Keth mandibles clicked with revulsion. "Your species possesses excellent biological adaptability," Vex explained as if discussing livestock. 3 centuries of genetic research has revealed fascinating possibilities. Velturan neural pathways, when properly modified, interface beautifully with human technological systems. Your children will make excellent components for our ships." The full horror of the human plan became clear. This wasn't revenge, it was harvesting. The Wraith had spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of converting other species into resources for human expansion. "You're monsters," Keth whispered. "We're survivors," Vex corrected. "You made us into this, Admiral. Every decision you made during the Great Purge shaped what we became. We simply learned from your example and improved upon it." On the tactical display, the human Foundry ships had already produced dozens of new hybrid vessels. Each one incorporated design elements from multiple species: Velturan bioadaptation, Korthak armor plating, Zephyrian shield technology. The humans had been busy during their isolation, studying and cataloging every species in the galaxy. "Sir," reported the sensor technician, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the converted defense platforms. They're not just weapons anymore, they're processing centers." Keth realized with sick certainty what those facilities were processing. The missing freighters, the captured civilian ships, the entire infrastructure of Velturan civilization was being systematically converted into raw materials for human expansion. "Emergency transmission to all Galactic Council members," he ordered. Full priority alert. Species classification. Existential threat. Sir, Communications Officer Drenval replied, transmissions are being intercepted and modified. The humans are controlling our communications. Vex's augmented features showed something that might have been amusement. We've been monitoring Galactic Council communications for centuries, Admiral. We know the location of every species, every world, every weakness. The Korthak's reliance on pheromone-based communication. The Zephyrians' vulnerability to specific electromagnetic frequencies. The Council's own political fractures and rivalries. What do you want? Kethmoran demanded, though he suspected he already knew. Everything, Vex replied simply. 3 centuries ago, humanity reached for the stars with hope and wonder. You taught us that the galaxy belonged to the strong, the ruthless, the survivors. We've spent 300 years becoming all 3. Now we're ready to claim our inheritance. The Foundry ships had completed their first wave of construction. Hundreds of hybrid vessels now filled the system, each one a fusion of human engineering and alien technology. But more disturbing were the smaller craft, scouts and infiltrators designed to slip past planetary defenses. Sir, Tactical Officer Krental announced, the scout ships are heading for the inner planets, targeting population centers. Kethmoran watched the deployment with growing dread. This wasn't a battle, it was a systematic harvest. Each scout carried conversion virus specifically tailored to different aspects of Velturan civilization. Atmospheric processors, water treatment facilities, food production centers. Everything necessary for survival would become tools for human expansion. Admiral, Vex continued, you have a choice. Surrender your remaining fleet and your crews will be processed quickly. Resist and we'll ensure they experience every moment of their conversion. Looking at his remaining 7 ships against the human armada, Kethmoran calculated the odds. His weapons were useless against vessels that absorbed energy attacks. His biomechanical ships were vulnerable to conversion. His crew was already showing early signs of virus contamination. But in his tactical archives he found one piece of information that offered a slim hope. The Wraith's original specifications included one critical vulnerability, something the humans might not have had time to fully upgrade during their centuries of isolation. Commander Yexandra, he whispered, prepare for ramming speed. Target the Wraith directly. All ships to attack formation. Admiral Kethmoran commanded as the eternal vigilance accelerated toward the human fleet. Target the Wraith with everything we have. The surviving Velturan vessels, 7 ships against an armada of converted hybrids, charged into what every crew member knew was certain death. But death with purpose, death that might give the galaxy's remaining species a chance to prepare for humanity's return. Captain Vex's voice echoed through the comm system, admirable Admiral. Futile but admirable. The Wraith didn't retreat. Instead, it moved forward to meet the Velturan charge while its converted escorts spread into a killing formation. The hybrid vessels opened fire first. Weapons that combined the biological precision of Velturan plasma with the brutal efficiency of human kinetics. The destroyer Righteous Fury took the opening barrage across its starboard hull. Biomechanical armor designed to self-repair instead began consuming itself as the conversion virus triggered reverse evolution protocols. Within seconds, the ship was tearing itself apart from the inside out. Fury is down, reported Tactical Officer Krental as the destroyer vanished in a cascade of biological failure. Estimated crew loss, 400. Continue the charge. Kethmoran ordered, even as his own ship shuddered under enemy fire. The cruiser Endless Devotion managed to close within weapons range of a converted Velturan destroyer. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. They were fighting their own ships, crewed by their own people who had been systematically modified into human slaves. Devotion is engaging the converted Vengeance's claw, Yexandra reported. Close-range bioplasma exchange. The 2 ships hammered each other with weapons that had once been identical. But the converted vessel had been upgraded with human modifications, reinforced hull sections, improved power distribution, enhanced targeting systems. The Endless Devotion fought valiantly but was systematically outmatched. Sir, the communications officer shouted over the sound of hull breaches, receiving transmission from Captain Molteris aboard the Devotion. The voice that came through was ragged with pain. Admiral, the converted crew, they're still alive. I can see them on the enemy bridge. But they're changed. Biomechanical integration with the ship's systems. They're screaming, sir. They're conscious but can't control their actions. Kethmoran's mandibles clenched. The humans hadn't simply killed their enemies, they turned them into aware prisoners in their own bodies, forced to participate in the destruction of their own species. The endless devotion exploded as its bioreactor was breached, taking 600 crew members and eliminating another piece of Keth Moran's dwindling force. 5 ships remaining, Yexandra hissed. We're not going to make it to the Wraith. But the Veltaran advance had served its purpose. In focusing their attacks on the flagship, the human fleet had concentrated their firepower, leaving gaps in their formation. The Eternal Vigilance slipped through, its biohull scarred but intact. Distance to Wraith, 2,000 kilometers, reported Navigation Officer Plexith. The human flagship finally began evasive maneuvers, but centuries of modifications had made it massive and unwieldy. Keth Moran could see the ship's original Prometheus-class destroyer hull buried beneath layers of alien technology and human augmentation. It was beautiful and terrible, a fusion of every species the humans had studied, every technology they'd stolen, every improvement they'd made during their isolation. Sir, Krental announced, the Wraith is charging some kind of primary weapon. Energy signature is massive. On the main screen, the human ship's bow section opened like a flower of death, revealing a weapon system that defied classification. It looked biological but moved with mechanical precision, organic but controlled by digital intelligence. It's a conversion cannon, Keth Moran realized, designed to convert entire ships instantly. The weapon fired, not energy or projectiles but something that looked like liquid evolution. A stream of adaptive matter that would rewrite anything it touched according to human specifications. Evasive maneuvers, Keth Moran ordered. The Eternal Vigilance rolled desperately, its biomechanical hull flexing like a living creature. The conversion beam missed by mere meters, instead striking the cruiser relentless honor that had been following their attack run. The transformation was immediate and horrifying. The Veltaran cruiser didn't just change appearance. It became something new, something that incorporated the best aspects of both species while serving only human will. Within minutes, another ally had become an enemy. Ramming speed, Keth Moran commanded. All remaining power to forward momentum. The Eternal Vigilance shot forward like a biomechanical spear, aiming for the Wraith's exposed weapon system. Human ships moved to intercept, but they were too late. Sir, Yexandra whispered, collision in 30 seconds. Keth Moran opened fleet channels to his remaining ships. All vessels, this is Admiral Keth Moran. It has been an honor to serve with you. For the Council. For our children. For every species that deserves to live free. The responses came back immediately from the 3 surviving ships. For the Council. For our children. Remember us. The Eternal Vigilance struck the Wraith at full ramming speed. The impact was catastrophic. The Veltaran flagship's biomechanical hull, designed for flexibility and adaptation, crumpled against the human ship's reinforced armor. But the momentum carried them forward, driving deep into the Wraith's augmented superstructure. Explosions cascaded through both ships as incompatible technologies interfaced violently. Human biosteel met Veltaran living metal. Digital systems clashed with organic networks. The result was chaos on a molecular level. Hull breach on all decks, reported damage control. Bioatmospheric systems failing. Estimated survival time, 6 minutes. But they had done it. The Wraith was crippled, its conversion weapon destroyed, its command section breached. For the first time in 3 centuries, human blood was spilling into the void. Keth Moran smiled as his ship died around him. Perhaps they had bought the galaxy enough time to prepare for what was coming. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the wreckage of both ships as they tumbled together through space, locked in a death embrace of twisted metal and dying biosystems. Admiral Keth Moran dragged himself through the breach that connected the Eternal Vigilance to the Wraith, his breathing apparatus working overtime to filter the toxic atmosphere. The human ship's interior was a nightmare fusion of technologies. Corridors that pulse with organic rhythm led to chambers filled with mechanical precision. Walls breathed while floors computed. It was as if evolution itself had been enslaved to serve human engineering. Behind him, the surviving members of his bridge crew followed. Commander Yexandra moved with serpentine grace despite her injuries, while Tactical Officer Krental's chitinous armor showed cracks from the collision. They were the last free Veltarans in the system, and they all knew it. Sir, Yexandra whispered, bioscanner readings show massive human presence ahead. At least 40 life signs, but the readings are strange. Keth Moran checked his own scanner. She was right, the signatures were human but heavily modified. Some showed more machine than organic tissue. Others displayed biological patterns that suggested extensive genetic manipulation. 3 centuries of adaptation, he murmured. They've become something new. They found the first chamber filled with what had once been human children. Now they were something else. Pale, elongated figures connected to the ship's neural network by cables that pulsed with bioelectric current. Their eyes had been replaced with multispectrum sensors, their limbs augmented with mechanical interfaces. They're the ship's crew, Krental realized. The children born during their isolation. The modified humans turned to look at them with expressions of curiosity rather than hostility. One spoke in perfect Velteran. "You are Admiral Kethmoran. We have been expecting you. Where is Captain Vex?" "The captain is eternal," the child replied. "He exists within all of us as we exist within him. The ship is our body. We are its mind." Yexandra's scales rippled with revulsion. They've created a collective consciousness. Not created, another modified human corrected. Evolved. Survival required unity. Unity required sacrifice. Sacrifice required change. As they moved deeper into the ship, the true horror of human adaptation became clear. The Wraith wasn't just a vessel. It was a living organism with human consciousness distributed throughout its biomechanical matrix. Every system, every weapon, every decision was made by the collective will of the survivors. "Here," one of the hybrid children said, leading them to what had once been the bridge. Captain Ronan Vex waited for them, but he was no longer entirely human. His body had been integrated into the ship's command system so completely that it was impossible to tell where man ended and machine began. Cables and organic conduits connected him to every part of the vessel. His consciousness existed simultaneously in digital networks and biological neural pathways. "Admiral," Vex said, his voice coming from speakers throughout the bridge while his augmented lips never moved. "You've damaged our conversion weapon, but you haven't stopped us. Merely delayed us. The galaxy will be ready for you now," Kethmoran replied. "They'll know what you've become." "Will they?" Vex's laugh came from a dozen different speakers. "Look around you, Admiral. Look at what we've accomplished." Through the bridge's viewing ports, Kethmoran could see the Velturan sanctuary system in its final stages of conversion. Planets that had once housed refugees now served as processing centers. Orbital stations had become hybrid shipyards. The entire system was being transformed into a launching point for human expansion. 23 billion Velturans, Vex continued, all converted into useful components for our civilization. Their biological adaptations will allow us to survive in environments previously impossible. Their technological insights will improve our ships. Their genetic diversity will strengthen our species. "You're talking about slavery," Yexandra hissed. "We're talking about evolution," one of the hybrid children corrected. "Species that adapt survive. Species that resist become extinct." Kethmoran noticed something in the tactical displays, subtle energy signatures that suggested the Wraith systems were more damaged than Vex was admitting. The ramming attack had done more than breach the hull. It had disrupted the delicate integration between human consciousness and ship systems. "You're dying," he said suddenly. "The collective is failing." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Vex's augmented features. "Temporary setbacks. Our foundry ships will repair." "No," Kethmoran interrupted, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "The foundry ships are automated. They follow the collective's commands. But the collective is fragmenting. You can't maintain unity across such massive distances and technological integration." Vex's biomechanical augmentations flickered with instability. Around the bridge, the hybrid children began showing signs of distress as conflicting signals cascaded through their shared consciousness. "The ramming attack didn't just damage your hull," Kethmoran continued, his tactical mind working through the implications. "It severed critical neural pathways. The collective is losing cohesion." "Irrelevant," Vex snarled, but his voice now came from only half the speakers. "We have backup systems, redundant networks. Built over 3 centuries of isolation," Yexandra added, understanding Kethmoran's reasoning. "But never tested under combat conditions. Never stressed by the kind of damage we've inflicted." The truth was becoming visible throughout the ship. Systems were operating independently, hybrid crew members were displaying individual personalities rather than collective unity, and the seamless integration between human consciousness and alien technology was breaking down. "Sir," Krental whispered, "the converted ships in the system. If the collective fails, they might revert to their original programming." Kethmoran felt a spark of hope. The converted Velturan vessels still contained the core neural patterns of their original crews. If the human control network collapsed, those patterns might reassert themselves. You've made a critical error, Captain, Kethmoran said to Vex. You've relied too heavily on centralized control. Take away the collective, and your empire becomes a collection of confused individuals. Vex augmented features contorted with rage. Then we'll rebuild. We'll adapt. We always survive. No, said a new voice. One of the hybrid children had stepped forward, but her words came from her own throat, not the collective speaker's. We're tired of surviving. We want to live. The child, she couldn't have been more than 16 when the modifications began, looked at Kethmoran with eyes that were still recognizably human despite their mechanical enhancements. My name was Elena Vasquez, she said. I was born on this ship. I've never seen a real sky, never felt natural sunlight. All I've known is the collective's will, the endless hunger for revenge against species I've never met for crimes I never witnessed. Other hybrid children began speaking with individual voices, their personalities emerging as the collective's control weakened. The decades of forced unity were dissolving, revealing the people they might have been. The Foundry ships, Elena continued, they're still following the collective's last coherent command, continue the conversion process. But if someone could reach them, could override the automation. The converted fleet would revert, Kethmoran realized. And 23 billion Velturans would be free. Vex's remaining augmentation sparked with desperate energy. I won't let you destroy what we've built. But he was fighting a losing battle. 3 centuries of enforced unity were collapsing as individual human consciousness reasserted itself throughout the ship. The price of survival had been the suppression of everything that made humanity human, and that suppression was finally breaking down. Elena, Kethmoran said, can you help us reach the Foundry ships? The young woman nodded, her hybrid nature allowing her to interface directly with the ship's systems. I can give you access to the command protocols. But Admiral, many of us want to go with you. We want to see what the galaxy looks like when it's not being conquered. The commandeered shuttle Second Chance raced through the chaos of the Velturan sanctuary system, its hybrid crew of former collective members working alongside Admiral Kethmoran's survivors to reach the primary Foundry ship before the automated conversion process could be completed. Elena Vasquez, her mechanical augmentations now serving choice rather than compulsion, interfaced with the shuttle's navigation system while providing crucial intelligence about human technology. The Foundry ship Genesis engine is the command node for all conversion operations, she explained, her voice carrying the weight of someone finally free to speak her own thoughts. If we can override its core directives, the entire automation network will revert to standby mode. Through the viewport, Kethmoran could see the system's transformation beginning to slow. Converted vessels were showing signs of confusion as their human control protocols broke down. Some had already reverted to Velturan configurations, their biomechanical systems reasserting original parameters. Sir, reported Yexandra, we're receiving communications from several converted ships. Their original crews are regaining control. The tactical display showed a remarkable sight. Velturan vessels literally reshaping themselves back into familiar configurations as their biological components overrode human modifications. It was evolution in reverse, adaptation choosing freedom over efficiency. Distance to Foundry ship, 2 kilometers, Elena announced. Admiral, you should know, there are still loyal collective members aboard that vessel. They won't surrender easily. Kethmoran nodded grimly. The shuttle carried the last functional weapons from his flagship. Enough for a brief engagement but not a prolonged battle. Everything depended on speed and precision. The Genesis engine was a cathedral of human engineering, a massive vessel that could have housed millions, instead devoted entirely to the construction and conversion of war machines. As their shuttle approached, defensive systems tracked them with predatory intent. Elena, can you fool their sensors? The young woman's augmented fingers danced across the control interface. I'm transmitting my collective identity codes. That should give us a few minutes before they realize I've gone rogue. The deception worked. Docking clamps secured their shuttle while Elena led them through corridors that pulsed with industrial purpose. Automated systems continued their work, building ship after ship according to specifications that would soon become obsolete. The core command center is through here, Elena whispered as they approached a heavily secured section. But Admiral, Captain Vex is still alive. His consciousness transferred to this ship when the Wraith began failing. The command center was a fusion of human ambition and alien technology, with Captain Ronan Vex's consciousness distributed throughout the facility's neural networks. His voice echoed from every speaker as they entered. Elena, he said, and for the first time in 3 centuries, His voice carried disappointment rather than anger. You were our greatest achievement. The perfect fusion of human determination and technological adaptation. Why are you throwing that away? Because it was never my choice, Elena replied, moving to the central control matrix. None of it was our choice. You made us into tools for your revenge, but we were never your weapons. We were your children. As Elena began interfacing with the command systems, Kethmoran watched the Foundry ship's operations slow and stop. Throughout the system, automated conversion processes ground to a halt. Ships that had been in various stages of modification remained frozen, giving their crews time to reassert control. You're destroying everything we worked for. Vex's voice carried 3 centuries of bitterness. Everything we suffered for. No, Elena said softly. We're choosing what you never let us choose. We're choosing to live instead of merely survive. The command override protocols cascaded through the Foundry network. One by one, automated systems shut down. Conversion viruses went dormant. Hybrid vessels throughout the system began reverting to their original configurations as their biological components overrode human programming. Sir, Yexandra reported, system-wide communications are coming online. We're receiving surrender signals from converted vessels. Their crews are regaining control. But the greatest surprise came from the converted ships themselves. As Veltaran crews resumed command, they didn't immediately flee or attack the remaining human vessels. Instead, they maintained position, creating a protective cordon around the Foundry ships. Admiral, came a transmission from the recently liberated cruiser Endless Honor. This is Captain Morthak. We've reviewed the tactical situation. The humans aboard these vessels. They're not the enemy. They're victims. Kethmoran looked at Elena and the other hybrid humans who had helped free the system. They were products of 3 centuries of genetic manipulation and technological integration, but they were also individuals who had chosen freedom over revenge. Captain Morthak is correct, Kethmoran replied. These humans deserve the chance to live their own lives. As the system stabilized, a remarkable negotiation began. The liberated Veltaran crews worked with the freed human hybrids to establish safe zones where both species could coexist. The Foundry ships, their conversion capabilities disabled, were repurposed into research and habitation vessels. Elena stood beside Kethmoran on the command deck, watching as former enemies worked together to repair the damage of centuries. What will you do now? He asked her. Learn, she replied. For 300 years we knew only survival and revenge. Now we can discover what it means to simply exist, to explore, to create instead of convert. In the months that followed, the incident at the Veltaran sanctuary system became known throughout the Galactic Council as the Liberation. The discovery of humanity's survival sent shockwaves through every species, but the manner of their liberation, choosing cooperation over conquest, offered hope. The hybrid humans, led by Elena and others like her, established colonies on uninhabited worlds where they could develop their own culture free from the constraints of the collective. Some chose to undergo procedures to reverse their modifications. Others embraced their hybrid nature as an evolution of humanity. Captain Ronan Vex's consciousness, now isolated and without the collective to sustain it, finally chose peace over revenge. In his final transmission, he acknowledged what his quest for survival had cost both species. We became what we fought against. Perhaps our children can become what we once dreamed of being. The Wraith itself was converted into a memorial, a reminder of the price of genocide and the possibility of redemption. Its hybrid technologies, now used for healing rather than conquest, helped establish new bonds between species that had once been enemies. Admiral Kethmoran, reflecting on the events years later, realized that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their adaptability. It had been their capacity for choice, the ability to change, to grow, to become something better than their circumstances demanded. The galaxy was larger now, populated not just by the species that had survived the Great Purge, but by the hybrid humans who chose to build rather than destroy. It was, perhaps, what the stars had always intended, not conquest but coexistence. And in the deep reaches of space, where new civilizations were taking their first steps toward the stars, the message was clear. Survival was not enough. The universe belonged to those who chose to live.